Today we have a really interesting and important topic, and one that we are speaking about literally because we have, in all of the communications that we have with other coaches, this is about the single biggest repeating pattern that we're seeing with newer coaches and sometimes, quite frankly, even seasoned coaches. So you don't want to miss this episode because you are definitely going to get some powerful takeaways that just might be exactly what you need to shift your coaching practice into exactly what you intended it to be in the beginning.
Yeah, so we have our, first of all, thank you for inflating my ego. I feel like inflated.
Can your ego be swole? You know, have you heard that term? Like when you go to the gym and you exercise, they say your muscles are swole.
Yes, it can be, I think.
Now your ego is swole.
So it's one of my favorite things. So at the end of the session, usually when I'm asking the question, like, well, what did you love about the session? Usually their mindset is like, oh, I love that you took me this, you did that. So I'm like, thank you for helping me boost my ego now. How does this help you?
That's funny.
And so that kind of what it does. It helps temporarily until I crash and then I will need you again.
So we're going to talk about marketing, but we're also going to talk about it in the context of your entire coaching business. Now, I was listening to Alex Hormozi this morning, and if you aren't aware of him, haven't listened to his podcast or watched any of his YouTube videos, highly encourage you to. He is very smart about business, about sales, about marketing, about all of that sort of stuff. He shared this morning as I was at the gym, this interesting pattern or predictable way that we move through business. And I wanted to share it with you because it fits very nicely into a conversation about, is your marketing actually working? And if it's not, what's going to happen? So tell me if you can relate to this. You hear about coaching. You're probably have done something else in life. You went to school for something else, or you've got this other career or job. You hear about coaching and you're like, I really like to help people. This sounds amazing. I could have a coaching career. I could potentially be my own employer and be able to work whenever I want, to stay at home. There's so many amazing things. So you hear about some of the significant success that other coaches have, and you are so excited. Now, this phase is what Alex calls the uninformed optimism. You are so optimistic, but the reality is your optimism is only coming from a small section of the reality of what it is to be a coach, but you're super excited. So you jump in, you get that certification, you tell the world through your Facebook post, I'm a coach now. And then you wait for people to respond. And you wait. And you wait. And now you're entering the phase of business called the informed pessimism. Because once you've jumped in and started to do the work, this is predictable. I've started and I'm part of multiple businesses, and it is absolutely predictable in my experience as well, that once I actually start, I have this oh crap moments, because there is 100% or 100 times more things and energy and work and time needed to get this thing off the ground than I ever thought. And so this section, this phase of the informed pessimism sets in, and you're like, oh my gosh, this isn't working. Why isn't it working? And you're just, this pessimism, this frustration is just continuing to grow, and you're realizing all the things, or maybe some of the things that you might need to be doing. And then you start to be like, well, can I really do that? Do I really have the time? Do I really have the energy? Can I really do this? And all of that excitement that you had built up when you made that decision to be a coach it's like the balloon is bursting. Maybe it burst, or maybe it's just that slow leak that sounds like somebody's let in one rip, and it's like flying all around the room. And it's like, at some point it's going to hit the floor and it's going to be limp. And that's what we call the crash and burn scenario. But before the crash and burn scenario happens, there's this moment that Alex calls the crisis of meaning. As you have been getting frustrated and overwhelmed at realizing that you didn't take into account all of the things that you need to do as a coach to actually be successful, you hit this moment where you're like, maybe I'm not meant to be a coach. maybe I made a mistake. Does any of this sound familiar? This moment of frustration and overwhelm and if kind of feeling like your balloon is bursting or the air is coming out, and you get to this moment where you ask, should I maybe not have done this? That is a pivotal moment. Pivotal moment. How you treat that moment is going to make all of the difference. So that's where we're going to leave the story. And I'll bet probably 95% of the coaches listening to this can resonate with how that went. So the critical question is, if you honor that initial inkling, that initial desire, that thought of like, maybe I should be a coach, I could really enjoy this, I could really have an impact. If you honor that, when you get to that moment of the crisis of meaning, there's a pretty important thing you can do there to keep yourself moving. But so we're going to take a pause on that. Faisal, what do you want to add to that before we kind of jump into where coaches are at right now with this informed pessimism and the challenges around marketing?
Yeah, first of all, that I relate to that transition, and I'm also still to this point because I'm in a transition period too, in my business, because I'm trying to push to the next stage, and I see that. So I don't even think it happens in the beginning. It happens every time you push towards the next stage when you don't know what's happening. So I feel the same thing, and I'll talk about the differences between the two. But the funny thing is, I haven't actually heard anybody use let one rip and go limp in the same sentence. I would not want to be in a fight with you. All the men who are listening to this, okay, this is a dangerous moment. Because that was like, oh, those are good terms, good visual for men at least.
That's funny.
It just I don't know how else to express that. But so going back to the serious point of what's happening, and this is where I'll share my experience, and then I'll share a little bit about the experience of the coaches that I'm talking to in this area. I would say most coaches who are starting out, they're stuck in that crisis of meaning situation. So they're from informed pessimism to crisis of meaning, and possibly the next potential area that Sheri didn't share is the crash and burn. And I've literally talked to a couple of the coaches who are in that stage right now, or getting to that stage right now. But for me, when I was starting out, it's that there was uninformed optimism. It's like, oh shoot, there is such a thing as coaching. I can do this. I can help people with this. And then you go towards trying to implement this, and you're sitting in your room or in your closet or in your car, or wherever the hell you're doing this. You're trying to figure out how you're going to promote yourself, and then the resistance comes in. That it starts with that internal resistance, like shit, it sounded much simpler when I heard it in that conference or that webinar, to put yourself out there, do a bunch of videos or posts, and then eventually people will connect with you, and then you're going to get on a call. But every step of the way, there's a huge amount of resistance, huge amount of resistance. And then the way I would deal with that personally was that I would do the thing that I'm comfortable with. I would go towards information. Generally speaking, coaches are very comfortable with seeking more information. So I would go and find another course or another article or another book that would help me, which is great. There's nothing wrong with that per se, but then that becomes a way to avoid the actual thing, which is the action steps needed to build it is actually fairly straightforward. Yeah. But I would get even some of the coaches that I'm dealing with pretty much even right now, after years of them being in the space, pretty much every month they're in some kind of 5-day challenge. They're in some kind of seminar. There's some, and then when you ask about, well, what is the next step for you? What are you doing? They're like, well, I get that. And I literally heard this sentence that, and it's like, I'm hoping that this sinks in enough so I take action. So they're hoping the information will somehow translate to the transformation they're looking for. Somebody shared it in our Facebook group that Ajit Nawalka said this: information does not equal transformation. It doesn't. It requires implementation to do that. And I was stuck with that for months. And then I share this timeline because it's fairly predictable, this timeline. It took me about 2 years to even get to a point where I was getting roughly a consistent set of clients that would help me build this part-time. And then about close to 3 years, between 3.5 years to 4 years, to have a very stable, consistent, full-time business clients. Now, from the time that I got started to that time where I had a stable system, where I understood what it takes to have a consistent set of clients, there was a lot that happened, but much of it didn't need to happen, to be honest. And this is why what we're trying to do in coaching mastery community, when you get to that crisis of meaning and informed pessimism, is the solution to that, what for me was support. And for a lot of coaches, it's support. And I want to share just one quick story before I send this back to Sheri. I spoke to one of our members who was really frustrated, and I was having a conversation in the background in Messenger with them, and he's like, at this point, I'm drained. And I didn't know what it was because I had talked to him a few months ago, and I knew he was part of a coaching program already. And I gave him some resources. I'm like, hey, work on this stuff. Let's check back in once you finish that program, because he had about a couple of months or so left. And when we got on the call, I could tell he was burned out at that point. He's like, I feel like I'm stuck, and I just went through a 6-month program. I put in a lot of resources. I put in time and effort, and he did. He actually, based on what he was saying, I believe that he put in time and effort, because he had actually spoken to about 70. He had reached out to about 75 people in his network, and he had worked with a couple of people. He had partially worked with 15 other people in there. And he felt stuck, and his problem wasn't that big, to me at least. And we worked through that, and by the end of it, there was a solution there. Now he's like, I've been stuck in this for the past month and a half. And yeah, the program I signed up for was a great program, was great information. He's like, I didn't know who else to bring this up to. And whenever he went on his own, he kept getting stuck. And then even when I was telling him like what the solution was, he kept telling me, he's like, I feel stuck. I don't think, and I had to pause, and I told him, like, I don't think you're stuck. I think you know exactly what the next is. I'm literally telling you what the next steps are. Like, it's not that complicated. I think you have the mind to follow that process. And like, would you say that you're stuck because you just don't have any energy left to dedicate to this in your mind? There's a lot of resistance. He's like, yeah, like I've been trying so many things. Like I feel stuck because like I've been like in my own space. And when you're in that space, when you're stuck in crisis of meaning as to why should, because now he's reconsidering, he's like, should I be spending this much time and effort on this? And slowly, if he doesn't deal with that, then he is going towards that crash and burn. But there is a positive direction in this if you get the right support. And this is where what I was sharing before, that I'm in that same space right now as I'm trying to scale my business from 200K to 1 million. I have no idea what I'm doing. Very similar to what I was starting out with. I don't fully have the confidence to have a system, because I don't have the systems yet in place. And I don't know if because I've hired a bunch of people to help me move that stuff forward, and it's putting a cash flow strain on my business. And I'm not used to that, because it's like 6 or 7 times more than what I've been used to for years. The only reason that I'm not going out of my mind, well, part of it is that I've developed a certain amount of resilience in the process and a certain amount of confidence in some of the things that I'm doing. And I know how to regulate some pieces of my emotions, but a huge part of it is because I have a business coach, a community, our own community here, who have been at multiple levels ahead of me. And I have people, a team member that are supporting me, and they're keeping me on track. So regardless of how I'm feeling, I need to do this work, because one, I'm going to burn my business out and my family's on the line, and my team members are asking me for stuff, and I've just invested in all these programs, and my coach is challenging me, you need to have this thing prepared. That's the stuff that's changing the direction from crash and burn to informed optimism. I'm optimistic, not because I'm the only one who's going to do this stuff based on my ego, but because there are other people that are supporting me in this process. Yeah. And what most coaches do, they count on their ability to have some kind of superpower to deal with the fear, the resistance, all that stuff. And yes, you can have a certain amount of that, but just by our nature, we're a social species. This is how we operate. You have a family, you have community, you have team that helps you move forward. And most coaches don't. They're sitting in their room, they're in their corner, trying to figure this stuff out. And what they're doing is they're going towards that crash and burn. And this is why your marketing is not working, your business is not working, because that's what's happening.